we do what's called broad-based organizing work. We work on issues that affect the community, Santa Cruz County, Monterey County, San Benito County, by working together with institutions like churches, synagogues, nonprofit organizations, local schools, other institutions essentially that stand for what matters to families, that have a value system about community, about the common good here where we live. We work on a broad range of issues. Sometimes they're very, very local, sometimes they're more county-wide or regional, but they emerge out of what we find out is going on with people within those institutions. On September 30th, we have our 15th anniversary convention. COPA was founded back in 2003, and so we're celebrating 15 years of existence in a large convention that we're going to have down in Salinas, with probably close to 1,000 people from our 28 different member institutions coming together. We hope that you'll be part of it. St. John's has been a member of COPA for a long time. I'm not sure from what date. Anybody know when St. John's joined COPA?
They were with the original group.
Founding members.
Since
2003. So some people from here may have been sure with all 15 years ago for the founding. A convention is something we don't do very often in COPA. We'll do a lot of local assemblies, gatherings around that, but a convention of this size is something we might do every 4 or 5 years. So this is a big event. And it's there, we're celebrating 15 years, but we're also lifting up what are some of the things that we want to work on together going forward. So what I want to do today is walk through what some of those issues are with you, but basically leave good enough time for questions or comments or reactions that you have, anything that would be helpful in you making a decision about whether you could be part of the St. John's delegation that goes on the 30th. So four key issues that we're going to deal with on September 30th. The first is around housing, access to housing, affordable housing. And here in Santa Cruz County, there's an opportunity coming up, something that COPA has gotten behind, called Measure H. Anybody heard of Measure H? Okay. Measure H would create, over the long term, $140 million at the county level that could go towards building more affordable housing, supporting people that want to add accessory dwelling units to their property, homelessness services, first-time home buyer opportunities. So it's a way to generate a lot of local money that could try to address some of the housing problems that we have, the housing cost problems that we have in this county. COPA has been working together with a number of our member institutions around this issue. This is particularly down in Watsonville. This is a big issue for a lot of the families that we work with in Watsonville. I want to tell you a quick story about a woman named Angelina from our Methodist church down in Watsonville. She and her husband have 4 young children. He was working in the field. He was a farm worker, and he was working for a company that had farm worker housing. So they were living there, but then he got a better job outside of working in the fields with a new company that did not have housing. So they lost their farm worker housing. They went to go try to find a place where they could rent with their 4 kids, and the prices are just astronomical. It's, at least $2,000 a month for them, and they just can't afford it. So they've been in transitional housing down in Watsonville for the last year. They were originally told they had to be out by September 30th. They got an extension to December, but after December, they've got no housing plan. They're still going around every chance they get to look at housing prices, potential rentals. They've got 4 kids, which is something that a lot of times when they go to inquire about a place, suddenly the place is not available anymore to them because they've got a bigger family. So Angelina has been very interested in this housing opportunity, but she found out a few weeks back that her supervisor down in Watsonville, her county supervisor, was not supportive of the housing bond. And the reason that was a problem is that they needed 4 out of the 5 county supervisors to vote yes to put it on the ballot, to put it on the November ballot. We knew up in Scotts Valley, the supervisor was sort of questionable about it. They had 3 votes for sure, but they weren't sure about whether they could get to the 4 votes they needed to put on the ballot. So Angelina and a number of other COPA leaders got together and met with their Supervisor Caput down in Watsonville. And Angelina shared her story with him, and we told a few other stories of the housing need in Watsonville. And Supervisor Caput, he listened to him. He was obviously very concerned, but he's very clear when he meets you. He's not going to tell you how he's going to vote. He's not going to tell you whether he supports this or not. And so they had this conversation with him. So then the day of the board vote on whether or not to put this on the ballot, Angelina and a couple dozen people from Watsonville, from COPA, showed up to the board vote. They sat in the very first row of the board chambers. They went up to Supervisor Kaplan and said, hello, good to see you again. We're looking forward to seeing how this vote goes. So when it came time for the supervisors to vote on whether or not to put Measure H on the ballot, Supervisor Kaplan expressed a lot of his concerns and things he thought maybe were wrong with the ballot measure, but then he suddenly surprised everyone in the room by saying, but I'm voting for this. And all the other supervisors said, well, hold on, Supervisor Kaplan, we haven't even put it to a vote yet. We haven't even gotten to that point. Nobody's made a motion yet to put it to a vote. And Supervisor Kaplan said, all right, fine, then I make a motion that we all vote on Measure H. And he ended up voting yes, we got it put on the ballot. And so now a lot of the COPA leaders like Angelina and others are organizing to make sure that this thing passes in November. So that's one issue that we're going to be working on in the convention, is generate more awareness of what Measure H is, why it's something that we felt strongly enough to get behind, what our work is going to look like going forward coming out of that. Any questions about Measure H or the housing piece of it?
Yeah. What was the opposition? Why not?
Because it would raise property taxes a little bit. So it would raise, for per 100,000 of property value, assessed property value, it would raise property taxes about $16. So, for an average home here, you're talking maybe, $100 a year increase in the property tax. So that's what, and then the county is going to be able to bond against that to get the $140 million. We think that's worth it, and a lot of our homeowners in COPA think that's worth it because of the housing, because of the traffic stuff that we deal with, because of some of the problems we have with getting housing put into the right places. It would spread housing equally around all 5 supervisors' districts, so it would all concentrated in certain areas. So we think it's worth it. That would be where some of the opposition would be if somebody does not want to see additional money on their property taxes for this issue.
Thank you.
There's no real organized opposition against it. The business community really wants it. A lot of the, obviously, workers really want it. A lot of organizations want it. So there's no organized opposition, but some individuals might be against it. Any other questions about the housing piece? Yep.
This has nothing to do with the rent issue.
And that's right, and that's really important. It's absolutely nothing to do with the rent control issue at Santa Cruz. It's completely separate, and that can create confusion for voters too. It's a completely separate issue that has to do with the construction of 100% affordable housing, nothing to do with the rents related to it. So good, thank you for asking. 5 minutes, okay, so let me keep moving. I'll go through 2 other issues very quickly, and then I want to spend a couple minutes on the fourth one. Healthcare access is mostly a Monterey County issue we've been working on. This is our leaders in Monterey County, our churches have worked together to create a healthcare program that serves right now 3,500 undocumented residents in Monterey County, full scope primary preventative care, labs, medications, radiology tests, and a limited number of specialty services for low-income, undocumented residents of Monterey County. It's a county-run program, so we're seeking to expand that, but also to bring in other providers, some of the other non-county providers and hospitals into the mix to be able to reach more people through that program. On immigration issues, our focus continues to be on federal reform on immigration, rather than just local resolutions and policies that don't necessarily change the system. But there is one thing called a U visa. A U visa is available to victims or witnesses of crime who cooperate with law enforcement. So if you're a victim of crime, if you don't have papers, but you work with police, work with the sheriff's department to try to investigate that crime, you become eligible for a certain visa. Now there are things that our local police and sheriff's jurisdictions can do to make that process a little bit easier for people, make it something that people understand more, know more about. And so we've been working with the sheriff's department, with local police chiefs, just to make sure all of their officers understand that and understand how to work with people who could be eligible for that. It's a very important visa for victims of domestic violence who are afraid to talk to the police. And finally, the last issue I want to talk about is mental health and addiction. Mental health and addiction is a newer issue for COPA. It's certainly not a new issue to this area, but it's something that in the last year or so, COPA institutions, especially in Santa Cruz County, have begun organizing a team around. And a lot of the work right now has been on something we call a Civic Academy. A Civic Academy is a teaching tool to go back into our churches and teach people about an issue that we think is very important, but also to create a space for people to talk about how these issues affect people they care about. We had one last weekend at the Methodist Church here in Aptos, and I was blown away by the stories that people shared about mental health and addiction and how it's affected their families. That almost everybody in the room had a story of somebody they love, somebody they care about, stories about opioid use, stories about depression, stories about suicide, very, very powerful. And what struck me the most was that almost all the stories talked about a church in some ways. Either a story of how important the church was to them and their family during that time as a place of support, a place of welcome, or there were stories of how a church let that family down during those times. And stories about stigma and rejection and how hard that was for a family that was going through something like that. So it was a powerful reminder to us about how important institutions like this are and what's going on with people in our community and how creating a space for people to talk about these things becomes so important. So we'll be talking about those 4 issues at the convention. We really hope to have a big delegation from St. John's there. I've got flyers if anybody would like them, or I can leave them with Pastor Tracy. But anybody who can make it down there, if this is the one thing you ever do with COPA is show up on September 30th, we'd love to have you. So anything that I missed, Tracy?
I don't think so. Thanks for the drive-by and mostly on your way to Peace United now. Thanks.
I'll leave some flyers and sign-up.
Okay, so if you want to leave those over here on the usher's table, that would be great. Thanks. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming for our Faith Leader program.